Alright, so this is going to be part 3 of manual swapping Guillermo's IS300. In part 1, we discussed all the parts required to manual swap an IS300 if you missed that. Part 2, we disassembled everything. And now on part 3, we're going to start reassembling everything, including the W58 trans. But before we do that, one thing we missed in the last video is we still had the flex plate in the car, so we're going to pull the flex plate out. And while we're there, we're going to replace the pilot bearing because we need to swap the auto one for a manual one. And we're going to do the rear main seal. Then we're going to attach the flywheel, clutch, throw the trans in, and see how far we can get for the day. But in this video, we will be wrapping up like the manual swap minus the wiring. So what we're going to be doing right now is me and Raymond are going to be removing the flex plate from the car. To do that, Raymond is going to be holding the crank with a 22mm socket so it doesn't spin while I'm breaking the flex plate bolts loose. And then Guillermo is going to be changing his traction arm because it's extremely blown and our friend Phil donated an arm to him. And yeah. So this is the automatic trans flex plate. We need to remove this to put the flywheel on for the manual trans. So what we're going to be undoing is these 14mm bolts that hold it to the crank. And after that, we're going to install the manual pilot bearing. While I'm undoing these, Raymond is going to be holding the front of the engine with the long breaker bar so it doesn't spin. And while he's doing that and I'm doing this, Guillermo is going to be undoing this traction arm to replace it with the one Phil gave us, because you can see here that bushing is completely shot. So when he would be driving, the wheel would just start smacking the rear of the car. And yeah, I just want to explain this because I know it's going to be really hard to see this on camera in case we can't get a shot of this. Can you crank the engine a few times?
Oh, sorry.
There you go. So much easier with the brake bar.
So much easier, what the fuck?
Leverage. So now that we got the flex plate off, what we're going to be doing now is installing the manual pilot bearing, and we're going to replace this rear main seal by putting a screw in it to pry it out and then tapping a new one in. And after that, we could put the flywheel on, the clutch on, and throw the trans in. So I guess the automatic trans doesn't use a pilot bearing, so I'm just going to be able to install the manual pilot bearing like this using a 24mm socket on top that does not touch the bearing area but the outer shell, and tapping it in.
What is this shit called again? Maybe. Should I use, what is this shit called again?
I think it's in.
Torque wrench.
If I don't put any pressure, it'll go through. Why is that not going?
Let's see. Oh, mira.
I tried drilling a hole to have something to pry on to pull the rear main seal out without damaging it, but it wasn't working. So I decided to use a pick. With a pick, you do have a high chance of scratching the crank or this casing. So I was being really careful with it, and you could see that I didn't scratch anything. I wouldn't say to do it like that, but I was getting frustrated and it worked, and it was good.
What's another way to do it?
You would have to if you didn't want to do all that, you would have to unbolt this casing right here and re-RTV it, which I also didn't want to do. So now that we got the old rear main seal out, we're going to install the new one. To install it, we're just going to use a 3/8 extension and just lightly tap all the way around the seal slowly in like a star pattern so it goes in evenly and not crooked like this. Before we do that, we're going to lube it with some oil so it doesn't go in dry. And one thing you want to be cautious of is you want to make sure that this inside lip doesn't fold out like this, because if it does, it'll leak oil past the crank and into the bell housing of the trans. So you just want to go really slow and be cautious, and you'll be fine. All right, and then get the outside.
Sure.
You're on a compression stroke, so it's a little stiffer. There we go. As you guys would have just seen, we finished putting the clutch and flywheel together in the car. So the last thing we had to do before we could throw the trans in is swap the throwout bearing. We ordered a W55 and a W58 throwout bearing because we weren't sure if they were different. And now that we have them side by side, we can see they are different. This is a 58 bearing and this is a 55. You can see the 55 has this like extra material on the top and the 58 has extra material on the bottom. So it's a good thing we ordered both because we do need the 58. So I'm just gonna pull this out now, like that, pull out the bearing. And now I'm just gonna clean up the splines and the shaft that the throwout bearing slides on a little bit, put some new grease on the fork and throw the new bearing in. I should have just pulled the fork out, but whatever.
For what? They didn't make it. Oh, okay. They don't have orange? Orange? Did they make orange and black? Oh, I mean, like,
Alright, so we got the throwout bearing and everything on. We greased the shaft. If you notice, I didn't put that much grease and I spread it out. The reason for that is because if you put too much grease in this area, it'll fling around and get in your clutch disc and your clutch will start slipping. So don't be too generous there. The next thing we're gonna do is just unbolt the slave real quick and then we're gonna throw it in the car. Alright, so we're just about ready to throw this into the car, but I wanted to quickly go over all the bolts for the bell housing in case anyone gets confused on this when they're doing their swap. The two longest 14mm bolts are for the starter and go right here, where the notch is for the starter. After that, you have a fat 17mm here, a fat 17mm here, a fat 17mm here, here, and here. So these are all fat 17s. And then you have two normal 14s that go from the front back right here. And then the same bolts go on the two bottom ones. But it's pretty straightforward, and now we're gonna throw this into the car. We were installing the trans, then Guillermo reminded us we never put the heat shield we got in. The reason we want to put this heat shield is because we know a lot of people who ran W58 swaps on their IS has said that there's a lot of heat from the center. So we're gonna add this to the inside of the trans tunnel to help like remove that heat. And yeah, so we're just gonna clean up the tunnel a little bit, put some shielding, and then continue putting the trans in.
Unless it's not gonna stick.
And then just rub. Oh, you gonna get that? Very common that fucking people who design pilot bearings that are aftermarket, they accidentally make them too tight. So I like using OEM ones.
Oh, she's tight.
We're in.
Let's go.
It's in.
You don't need to put nothing in the back?
He's missing the cover. We tried doing this properly by just lining everything up and slipping the trans in, but because the input shaft bearing was like super tight, we could get it past the clutch and get everything in. But we could not get the trans no matter how hard we tried to click into the like crank. that final little bit. So what we ended up doing, which is not recommended, is we put one bolt on the top right here, and then right across from it we put one bolt on the bottom. We struggled for a little bit, but what we ended up doing is putting the top bolt, which would get the trans a little crooked like this, and then we'll use one of the starter bolts on the bottom because it's longer to pull it in. Now I'm taking the starter bolt off, putting the proper bolt, and everything's seated.
All right, so now that we have installed the transmission, we have to install the trans mount and the cross member, which is down there, but I'll show you right now. The difference between these two is that this one's just for straight up for a 58, like for SC. So in order for me to fit, basically I emailed them and asked them if it was gonna work, and they said no, that I needed to get this one because this one was basically the top of it is for a 58 and the bottom is for an IS, since I am putting an SC transmission into the IS300. So we needed to get this adapter basically so I can actually run the crossmember since I don't have an OEM crossmember. Okay, so this is the W58 one. This is the one that came with it. So as you can see, it has one hole right here and one hole in the back. And at first me and Dylan were really concerned. We were like, oh, this doesn't match the other one. But then we took this one off, and then for this one it just matches up over here with these two side holes. Tight it on back. It's all in. It's gonna be a moment of the truth to put in this one-piece drive shaft.
Let's see if it fits.
Let's see if it fits. All right, we're good. Now we're just gonna Loctite the bolts and put them in. That's one. And then angle it. Oh, that's in. There we go.
The thing is I had to pick a gym that was like, I wanted to pick a gym that it's like 5-10 minutes away. It's not that far. It's like one exit basically from my house. But like,
So we made amazing progress today. We got the drive shaft in, we got the transmission in, everything bolted, and we got the headers in as well. So we just need the Y pipe and then all the pedals and stuff. So we're one day away from this all being complete. But yeah, today was amazing. Amazing progress. Bye! We'll see you guys in the next one.